Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna also mute everybody besides Miss Marsha. So Miss Marcia Ausler is here to talk to us about heat stress. Can you please introduce yourself and take it away? Thank you. I'm going to share my
start.
You can share. Can you share screen? Do you have that option? I think maybe. Oh, share screen. I'm sorry, I always should have done this beforehand, but how did you do that before, Anthony? Yes. How did you do that? There should be a green button at the bottom of your screen, Martha, that says share screen.
Okay, here we go. I had to update my privacy settings. All right, so everybody can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, my name is Marcia Ausler, and I am an instructor of occupational safety, health, and environment at Southeastern Louisiana University. This presentation was made in collaboration with the Louisiana Department of Public Health, and this presentation was developed by a recent graduate of our program, Dalton Vincent, as well as myself. So some objectives by the end of this presentation, attendees should be able to understand and differentiate different types of heat illnesses, be able to identify various risk factors of heat illness, and understand how to respond to heat-related emergencies and illness symptoms. Heat-related illness is an illness or a serious medical condition involving the body's inability to cope with heat, and heat-related illnesses result when the body absorbs or generates more heat than what it can release, causing different heat-related symptoms because of overexertion in hot and humid conditions. And the main heat-related illnesses we're going to discuss in this training include heat stroke, heat exhaustion, heat cramps, and heat rash. So why are we talking about heat? It's clearly a huge problem. Most of us live in Louisiana. We listen to the news. We listen to the radio. Recently, our governor declared a state of emergency over the heat situation here. This graphic is nationwide data. So 2019, there were 43 national work-related fatalities from heat. It increased a little bit in 2020 and then dropped a little bit in 2021. But specifically to Louisiana in 2019, we had 219 individuals hospitalized due to heat-related illnesses in Louisiana. And in 2020, we had 14 deaths just in Louisiana that were heat-related. And then 2023.
I'm trying to.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No.
You're good. You need us, Anthony?
No, I was trying to get my son, and I forgot I had my. I forgot I wasn't muted. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that.
So in 2020, 14 individuals died in the state of Louisiana due to heat-related illnesses. And then so far, as of August 28th, 2023, we've had 28 heat-related deaths in the state. These are not just work-related deaths. And then if you're not familiar already, the Department of Public Health has a dashboard with all sorts of data and statistics available if you want to just kind of review that. But the big picture with the data this year, the 28 heat-related deaths in Louisiana, these are mostly involving males over the age of 30. So this is older males, a big problem. but it's not just males, it's females too. All right, so we're going to go into detail on each of these heat-related illnesses. I know I have heat stroke at the top, but we're going to start in order of magnitude going through the specifics on heat rash. So heat rash is a skin irritation resulting from excessive sweating. Individuals are more susceptible to heat rash during the hot and humid weather times, and symptoms of heat rash include red clusters of pimples or blisters, and these usually appear where skin meets other skin. So that the neck, the chest, breasts, the groin area, anywhere where you have skin creases. And first aid, you want to keep the area dry. You can use hydrocortisone creams. You do not want to use powder, but you just want to avoid scratching the skin. And this is a common illness resulting from heat exposure. We have a graphic here. Just sometimes people want to interchange this with chafing, and I just want to emphasize that it's separate from chafing, and this is part of why we want to encourage wearing loose, breathable clothing. But the medical care for this is pretty topical. You can treat it yourself. It's not dire. The next illness that we're going to discuss is heat cramps. And heat cramps, these are cramps resulting from a lack of salt and hydration. And symptoms of heat cramps include obviously muscle cramps, spasms, or just pain in the muscles. First aid for heat cramps, you want to provide electrolyte-rich drinks or salty snacks, as well as other hydration. But you want to seek medical care for heat cramps if these symptoms continue after an hour. So if you're able to just cool the individual and provide fluids and symptoms resolve, great. But if we still see symptoms after an hour, that's when you want to seek medical care. But yeah, we have risk factors if we have workers on a low sodium diet, if the worker has heart problems, but we're just concerned with those specifics for heat cramps. Heat exhaustion, this is kind of a next level. Heat exhaustion is the bodily response to excessive water and salt loss. And symptoms of heat exhaustion, these can mimic maybe what might look like a stomach virus, but things like headache, nausea, weakness, irritability, sweating, increased body temperature. You can have symptoms from heat exhaustion in the moment when you're exposed to heat, or you can have these symptoms present themselves hours later when you're at home, beyond the exposure of heat. So that's something to be aware of. First aid for heat exhaustion, you want to cool the individual, and by whatever means necessary. We don't always have the ability to give someone a ice bath, but just whatever shaded area, if there's air conditioned areas, or maybe we can turn on a vehicle, get the person just out of the heat, provide a cold compress, once again, provide liquids and electrolytes. And yeah, if we're seeing these symptoms, this is something that you want to respond with medical care. Maybe not necessarily call 911, but just take them quickly to urgent care to receive treatment. Heat stroke. Hopefully most of us are very familiar with heat stroke. This is the most serious heat-related illness. This is where the body cannot maintain proper temperature. Temperature can, the key word here is can, raise up to 106 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. People can have heat stroke without having an elevated temperature. So you don't want to just discount that. You want to focus on the symptoms, and not just the temperature. But obviously this is fatal if it's not treated in time. Symptoms of heat stroke include confusion, loss of consciousness, altered status, slurred speech, seizures, convulsions, hot or dry, profuse sweating. But just if someone's kind of talking nonsensically, or not able to walk in a straight line, or just exhibits general central nervous system symptoms, you want to be really concerned about heat stroke. First aid for heat stroke, immediately call 911 if you're seeing if you're seeing these symptoms, you want to contact 911 as soon as possible. After you've reached or called emergency services, you want to take every effort possible to cool the individual. Remove as much clothing as you can, soak the individual if you have ice bath or shaded area, air conditioned, whatever means necessary. Just try to cool that individual. It's important here not to provide too many liquids if you're suspecting this individual of having a heat stroke. I think this is relevant, especially with the days that we've been experiencing. Most of us hopefully are familiar with the relationship of humidity and ambient temperature. Her heat index is a combination of humidity and our ambient air temperature. So when we're in the 90s, or it feels like we're having this false fall, a little bit of a tease, it feels like the temperature is dropping a little bit, but we still have high humidity to put us in dangerous heat index zones. So just you want to be familiar with both the humidity and our ambient air temperature. All right, risk factors. So we're talking about heat. We've talked about symptoms and ways to identify if someone's experiencing heat-related illnesses, how to respond to these symptoms that we see. Additionally, we want to be aware about certain risk factors that put us or our coworkers or our employees at a greater risk for experiencing these illnesses. Obviously, if you work outside in the heat, you're at a greater risk. Individuals with larger muscle mass are going to be at a greater risk. Acclimation is huge. You want to make sure that you don't just throw somebody into activities if they're not used to the heat. You just have to slowly acclimate workers over the period of 2 weeks before they're just exposed to these conditions. Individuals with high blood pressure are at a greater risk in certain chronic medical conditions. Acute illnesses are referring to if someone's just kind of under the weather or maybe has a cold or some sort of respiratory something. But if you have some sort of acute illness like this, you're at a greater risk for experiencing heat illness. And then also if you take certain medications, which I'm elaborating on in this slide. So with certain medications, you're at an increased risk. So diuretics, most blood pressure medications are diuretics, which kind of flushes your system of fluid. So you're trying to retain fluid to prevent you experiencing heat illness symptoms. So anything that's pushing fluid out of your body, therefore, is going to put you at a greater risk. Also antipsychotics, like lithium, benzodiazepines, like Xanax, ADHD medications, or antihistamines, cold medications, allergy medications. All of these medications put you at an increased risk of experiencing heat illness. So some preventive measures for reducing your risk for heat illness: just drink adequate amounts of water. It's recommended to consume about 8 ounces of, 1 cup or 8 ounces of water every 20 minutes, making sure that you're consuming electrolyte drinks. In the workplace, some employers, they just think that having a big pallet of water bottles is acceptable. And it's a great start, but you still need to have electrolyte replacing drinks or electrolyte popsicles, also salty snacks. All of these things are needed in addition to shaded access areas. Also, having a good night's sleep helps. I'm not saying no alcohol, period, but just there is a relationship between alcohol consumption and risk factors for heat illness. The same thing can go with caffeine, but it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 scenario. But the alcohol consumption, caffeine consumption, medication, these are all risk factors in this scenario. Obviously having shaded areas, just being healthy and fit and just getting regular exercise helps reduce the risk for being susceptible for heat stress. wearing appropriate lightweight clothing, and then just being a good person and just keeping an eye on your coworkers. If a lot of these tasks that we're doing outside, sometimes we just have one person doing their own thing. Just having some method in place just to keep track of other people, just to keep a pulse on our friends, our coworkers. It's valuable. Just a graphic of just a few different ideas. I mentioned lightweight clothing, but just an illustration of something that's breathable. You don't want to wear things that are too heavy or thick. Squinchers are see those a little bit more often in industrial settings, but electrolyte drinks. I know sometimes we're concerned about our sugar consumption, and some of these drinks have higher sugar content than others, but just salty snacks, making sure that we're having electrolytes in some form or fashion. So kind of reiterating a little bit, general treatment for heat stress. If we see any of these heat stress illness signs, heat rash is not as dire as heat cramps, heat exhaustion, or heat stroke, but just stop the physical activity. Or if we see these signs in someone else, just kind of help move them to a shaded area, just help them remove any extra heavy or tight clothing, make sure that we're taking as many precautions as we can to cool the individual, provide beverages to help replenish those electrolytes. And then if an individual is experiencing cramping, just help that person kind of stretch those muscles if they're experiencing that cramping. So here's just a little scenario. If we have an individual, we're working outside and we see a coworker and they are exhibiting just signs that they're not acting like they normally act. They're kind of confused. They're not able to walk in a straight line, not able to communicate effectively or form full sentences. And we determine that this coworker is probably having a heat stroke. What do we do? Feel free to respond.
Okay, I'll respond for everybody. We get the person to shade, get some water, cool him off, cool towels, call 911 first, sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the big takeaway. Call 911 immediately and like have someone else start cooling the individual as soon as possible. But yeah, time is of the essence because this is time sensitive for this. Also, I wanted to mention that OSHA NIOSH heat safety tool. This is an app that you can download on your Android or iPhone, and it provides really useful information. I know we have the weather apps on our phone, but this just gives us the ambient air temperature with humidity to give us the heat index, and then it also gives us the recommended amounts of water that we should consume throughout the day. It just kind of reminds us of what the signs and symptoms and treatment methods are for the various types of heat illness. And it's free, and it's a really useful little app. All right, so no, not too many of us wanted to respond to the scenario a few minutes ago, but all of the answers in this little post test are true. Just reiterating, certain medications can increase the risk of heat stress. If we're taking medication for blood pressure, that puts us at an increased risk for heat illness. And heat stroke, we should not just associate heat stroke with having central nervous system symptoms and a fever. Someone can experience a heat stroke without a fever, so don't rule that out whenever we think someone might be having a heat stroke. Once again, heat exhaustion, those symptoms can mimic a stomach bug, and we can have symptoms arise from heat exhaustion hours or days after the exposure. And once again, humidity levels increases the risk for outdoor workers. So recently we had a little break in the heat, but then humidity is still high, and we're still in these danger days. So we don't want to just have a false sense of security seeing the temperature just drop by a little bit, because it's still dangerous to to be outside for too much. But that's the little post test, just a reiteration. If you don't mind, I have a voluntary survey. It just collects data on our outreach efforts. But if you don't mind, if you could scan the QR code, it takes you to this short little form. I'd appreciate it if you wanted to fill that out. But I really appreciate your attention. And if anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to talk.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for being here and talking to us about this. It is very important. I hope that everybody got on here to talk about heat stress in people, not necessarily heat stress in plants, because being a plant industry, I know we are all very concerned about the plants and all. That's our livelihood, but the people, we can't have the plants without the people. So this is very important topic of conversation to have. Also, I think that in our state in Louisiana, they have called for an emergency. It might be lifted now, for the heat, but I think that it was more geared towards, the emergency of wildfires, not necessarily the people in the heat. And that's a little concerning. I don't have my facts straight, so don't quote me on that. But we as LNLA are also going to be working with some other groups to get some legislation in place that in areas of the state there's noise ordinances, and that you cannot have noise only within the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Mostly in those areas like New Orleans, where everybody's kind of closer together. And we are going to work this session to have it for the state that in extreme heat, the noise ordinance go from, or if there's a state of emergency, or maybe it's at a certain degree for the people's sake, the noise ordinance go to 5 a.m. so they can go, our landscapers and our farmers and people who actually make a little bit of noise in the work that they do, unfortunately, so they don't have to be out there in the blazing heat sun, have that noise ordinance go, more into the shadier times of the day, so they don't have to be out there in the excessive heat. But I appreciate you being here and talking about this. People are so important, and especially to those business owners. It's a huge liability to have somebody die on you. I mean, you definitely don't want them to suffer in any kind of way, but there have been incidences of death in the workplace, and you want to prevent that. And we need to take every precaution that we can to take care of these people and ourselves. So does anyone have any questions for Marcia? If not, I have her contact information if you have questions later. And if you have information that you gather from this survey, please let us know about that so we can share it with everyone. And I appreciate you being here. And so for now, that is it for our September call, and we'll see you all back here in October. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Marcia. I will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.